Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the University of Sydney session today. Our session today is called Your Future Beyond the Lab. We're very lucky today to have both the Faculty of Engineering and the Faculty of Science together with us. So my name is Carlos Mesa, I represent the University of Sydney, and I'm very glad to have you here today. So let me introduce you first, Professor Tim Wilkinson from the Faculty of Engineering.
Hi.
Thank you, Tim. And now we have Professor Michael Whitland from the Faculty of Science.
Yeah, hi.
And last but not least, we have Dr. Jakub, an alumni from the university.
Hi, everyone.
Thank you, Jakub, Michael, and Tim. So Tim, now we go for you. Thank you.
Okay, ready to start, Carlos?
Ready.
Well, hi, everyone. Look, thank you so much for joining us here this evening to spend an hour or two finding out about some of the fantastic careers that are available in the field of STEM. And I also wanted to say thank you very much for turning off the Olympics for an hour. I know it has been a very exciting couple of days so far. So the fact that you've joined us here is already a really, really good thing to hear, because one of the things that is just so important about going well academically at university, which is then propelling you into the career that you want, is to be excited about that new profession that you're going to join. So I can imagine that you probably haven't even done the HSC, but I would like you to think of today as the first day of joining whatever profession it is that you're interested in joining. Because the more you know about what you're going to do, the more you're excited about it, the more interested you are, the more successful you're going to be, the more motivated you are going to be, both for those exams that you're going to do in a month or two's time, and then at university. So, what is engineering? Well, I'm actually going to put the challenge onto you. Google it. You will find so many different websites that explain what the different things there are in engineering, what an engineering career is like. And actually, one of the reasons why I'm not going to spend too much time discussing it today is because there are a lot of fields: biomedical engineering, electrical, aeronautical, software. There's a large range available. So whichever one takes your fancy, challenge number one for you tonight is to spend a little bit of time researching, whether that's Googling a day in the life of a civil engineer or whatever it is that you might possibly want to do. But what does an engineer do? And it's very varied. Now, I'm actually a civil engineer, a structural engineer. So that little picture up in the top left-hand corner of the screen, that's the drawing that we would draw when we were going to design a concrete beam. So there's some mathematics involved in being an engineer. But what's the real work? The big picture here that you can see up there is of an overpass that's being built over a railway line. Now think about the engineer's job in that particular task. It's not just deciding how many reinforcing bars are going to be in that reinforced concrete, but how on earth are we going to do this safely and make sure that the trains can still run, underneath this work site for maybe 18 hours a day. On a job like this, you actually have the opportunity to close the train line maybe for 3 or 4 hours each night. So the task is actually going to be involved talking to lots of different people. The people who operate the crane, how heavy a weight can you actually make these precast concrete panels? The railway engineers, what are their requirements for perhaps the electrical wires? There's so much about engineering that is working with other people as part of the team, so much more than just sitting in an office doing some calculations. So challenge number two, do you know an engineer? Is there someone in your household, a family member, someone in your street, an older brother or sister who is an engineer? Ask them out for coffee. Now, at the moment, it might have to be a virtual coffee, or get them to take you out for coffee and ask them about their career. What do they love about being an engineer? What do they hate about being an engineer? The more you're exposed to what this profession is potentially going to be, the more prepared you're going to be. So what does a young engineer do in their job? So we asked them. So this was the results of a survey done many years, a few years ago, and basically asked them two questions. How much of your time do you spend sitting at the computer doing calculation type stuff? And those answers were the blue bars, right, which are the left-hand side of your screen. And the young engineers were saying, well, look, we really only do that 10 or 20% of the time. What they were doing the most of their time, down the right-hand side of that graph, was interacting with other people, going to meetings, research, going out on site. Now, I'm sure you might have been told by people, oh, you're good at maths, you're hopeless at English, you'd be a perfect engineer. That's actually far from the truth. There is so much visualization, interaction, communication that an engineer has to do. The mathematics doesn't actually represent a huge amount of the tasks that they undertake, even starting from their very first job. So let's think about you in your particular situation, probably in year 11 or 12 in high school. What are the types of abilities or skills that you might have already that could make you a good engineer? So let's firstly think about the center of the circle. That's what an engineer does, once they are trained and do their job. It's about making things work. Now, where are you? You're on the outside of this circle. And we talk about what's known as the learning habits of the mind. And there's a number of different things that, if you currently have them now, would actually be good about being an engineer. I reckon the most important one is up the top, curiosity. Do you look up in the sky and think, oh my God, how did Richard Branson launch that spaceship up into the sky just a week ago? How do they build those tall buildings? How does my computer work? If you are curious about things, if you want to know what makes things work, that's the type of ability that's important now, the type of mindset that's important now for you as a year 11 or 12 student, which would put you in good stead to go well in engineering. So let's put ourselves forward 4 or 5 years' time when you've finished university and you're after that first job. What are the types of skills that someone is looking for in that first job interview? So we've asked lots of engineering companies, what do they look for? And firstly, I'll tell them what they're not necessarily looking for. Someone who can just replicate solutions in a textbook, who can memorize something, because anyone can do that. The type of things that they really want to be looking for is how you go about a problem that you haven't done before, that no one else has solved before. How do you research it? How do you take something that you might have done over here, something you've done over here, and try and merge them together into something new? The other thing that's important about being an engineer is your ability to work with a client, because they're the ones who pay the bills. Understanding what they're after and being able to communicate your solution to them in language that they understand. They're the type of things that an employer is going to be looking for from you in 4 or 5 years' time. So what is the job market like right now for engineers? And I'll firstly just say, look, what's the job market going to be in 5 years' time? I don't know. But I just went to seek.com and I Googled engineer. There were 28,000 jobs there. Now, I would actually encourage you now, well, maybe not right now, maybe later, to do exactly that. Go to a job site and look for engineering jobs. Just click on a few of them. What are the types of skills that they're looking for? How would you apply? What might be the types of things that you could do over the next 5 years that's going to help you apply for one of those jobs in 5 years' time? That's challenge number 2. Was that challenge number 3? What else about the job market? How employed are engineers and what are their salaries like? Now, one of the things that we think is particularly important, especially if you go to the University of Sydney, is your ability to research, to find things out. So I've researched this and I would encourage you to. So this is something called the Graduate Outcomes Survey, and it lists the employment rates and starting salaries of lots of different professions, around Australia. Engineering has one of the highest employment rates. About the only field that's been having employment rates higher than engineering is sort of in health type areas. But this is the type of information that I hope you, if you're serious about your career, would be looking up, no matter what career you are actually looking for. Here's an important question. Does doing a degree at university lock you into that career for good? I mean, you're 16 or 17 right now. I'm going to say something really daunting and scary. You're going to be working for the next 50 years. Now, this is some data that was obtained from the United States, and they mapped people, what degree they did at university, and where they eventually ended up, what their career was. Now, I know it's maybe a touch small. That thick yellow band represents a large number of engineers who went into engineering, but about half of them have gone into a whole lot of other careers. That's on the right-hand side of the graph. Social services, agriculture, arts and entertainment. This graph shows a huge mobility across a whole range of initial university degrees and where people end up in the future. There is absolutely nothing wrong with changing your direction after 1 year, after 2 years, or after 49 of those 50 years. I hope that whatever career you want to go to, you're going to have some type of mentor, some type of hero, someone that you might aspire to be like. And I'm hoping that it could be someone like Gillian Kilby. Now, Gillian was one of our civil engineering students about 10 years ago. And give me a second to tell her story. She was from the country, so coming down to Sydney to study engineering was a big step for her. Her first job after finishing university was in Sydney. She worked on rebuilding some of the vintage timber wharfs in Welsh Bay on Sydney Harbour. But after having done that for a couple of years, she decided she wanted to give back to the community that she came from, and went back home to rural New South Wales and set up her own consulting company that specialised in infrastructure solutions for local councils. Doing a career in engineering really is an opportunity for you to make a difference. And Gillian certainly made a big difference, both to her local community, but also to lots of little local communities, just like the ones that she originally came from. So I want to revisit some of these challenges that I've given you tonight, because you've already done a really great thing by giving up some of your time to listen to us. And these challenges are easy, I hope. I want you to use the internet. Now that's easy. I want you to look up and do a little bit of research on different types of engineering, civil, mechanical, biomedical. I want you to research job sites. What type of careers will happen if you click on, electrical engineer? Number two, this one's even easier, watch TV. On many TV channels, you will find shows about infrastructure, things that engineers do. Find out a little bit about the type of tasks that you might be doing if this is the career you're interested in. Number three, drink coffee. Gosh, these challenges are getting even easier. Maybe not at the moment with COVID, but if you know someone who's an engineer, go and have a chat with them and speak to them about their career. And finally, if you can, expose yourself to the engineering profession. Again, when we finally get out of COVID, There are excursions, there are open days, there are industry talks done by real engineers. See what we look like. We look just like you. See what we sound like. We sound just like you. See what we act like. We act just like you. Those challenges will help you get excited about whatever profession it is that you're going to end up in. So, whichever way you choose, it's really important that you make an informed choice. And I hope over the next few months, between where you are now and when university starts, you are taking opportunity to learn about different things to make that informed choice. If you decide based on nights like tonight that engineering is for you, that's fantastic. If you also decide that engineering is not for you, that's just as fantastic, because we really want you to make an informed choice about what you're doing. But just remember, it's not going to lock you in for the next 50 years. So no matter what it is that you're going to do, I wish you the best of luck. So remember, I want you to be excited about becoming an engineer or whatever it is that you're going to do. I will be available in the panel session in about half an hour's time to answer any questions about engineering. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, thanks, Tim, and thanks also, Carlos. Thanks, Tim, for that terrific account of engineering. So I'm Mike Wheatland, and I'm going to talk about careers in science and really how diverse they are, how they extend far beyond the lab. So I'm a professor in physics. I'm also the Associate Dean Education in the Faculty of Science. But my research area is solar astrophysics. And the picture on this title slide is a really beautiful image of the sun in the extreme ultraviolet. And it shows the solar corona, the extended outer atmosphere of the sun. So I study events that happen in the solar corona, like the eruption that's actually captured here in this image at the upper left. How did I get here? Well, I started studying a Bachelor of Science at the University of Sydney in 1988, quite a while ago. I didn't think that I would end up where I am. It still surprises me. It really surprises me. I was just interested in science. I was interested in the sort of fundamental aspects of science, and I pursued my interest. That's where I've ended up. I mean, I started with friends, and I had colleagues along the way who also studied science. Most have not ended up in academia. However, they have enjoyed wonderful, diverse careers, I would say, really across the spectrum. And that's what I'll try to point out here. I'll try to emphasize the possibilities. So this is Kathy Foley. She is also a physicist. She also studied a Bachelor of Science, majoring in physics like me. But Kathy is the Chief Scientist of Australia. That's a terrific role. She was also the Chief Scientist at the CSIRO for quite a long time. On this slide, she's identifying how crucial science is for solving the major problems that we face today, from climate change to manufacturing capability, to ensuring food supplies, to tackling the pandemic, a really key problem. And as the future of work evolves, it's anticipated that the workforce will spend more time applying science, using science and math skills. This slide tries to emphasize that. So STEM is science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. STEM graduates are highly sought after, increasingly sought after, and that's because of the analytical, quantitative skills that they have through their study. This slide in particular shows some of the statistics around the demand for STEM graduates. It also emphasizes again how STEM graduates are solving the key problems of our era, like the pandemic that we face. Here's a pandemic themed image with somebody waiting at an airport with a mask on. So the COVID-19 pandemic is with us, continuing. It's not a catastrophe, but it's proving, I would say, very disruptive, and many things will change as a result of the pandemic. But things were already changing before this occurred. One trend before was the increasing demand in the workplace for really skilled workers. The job losses have been predominantly in middle wage occupations, with low and high wage occupations growing. And it's predicted that this will increase after the pandemic. Having training in STEM areas will be even more valuable. It positions you for this changing work environment. This slide illustrates science at the University of Sydney. I think it illustrates it really well, and it illustrates the point that science is not just one occupation. Unlike the more vocational degrees, psychology, vet science, and I would have said engineering, but I think Tim made a really good case that even engineers end up in diverse fields. But unlike the more specifically focused degrees, a science degree is a general degree and enables many careers. Science is an approach to understanding the world rather than a destination or a job. This slide shows staff and alumni in the science faculty in diverse occupations across health, biology, science communication, marine science, and in research. Let's narrow in on some graduates and sort of identify how they went through their career. I think it's really interesting to look at this. Once you start a science degree, there are really many options open to you. In some cases, the connection between the degrees, the areas that the people studied and where they ended up is really clear. In particular, at top left, there is a research star at the University of Sydney. That's Professor Liz New from chemistry. And unsurprisingly, Liz studied chemistry at university. But her other major there is listed as medical science. So it's an interesting question as to whether she perhaps considered a different career at the start when she began at university. Let's look at some of the other people on that, with that group of graduates. This one, Olivia Agar. Olivia, as it says, grew up without a connection to farming, but she studied a Bachelor of Science in Agriculture at the University of Sydney, and she did honours in that. And she's ended up in a research firm that is an agricultural market analysis firm. Here's another example, which I think is a very interesting one. This is Nick Leader. He's in quite an impressive position. He's the head of Google in Ireland. So what do you study to end up as a head of Google? That's a really good question, isn't it? Well, what did Nick study? It's shown here. He began with a Bachelor of Science majoring in mathematics. Is that an obvious thing? I don't know. I'm not sure that it is. But he did a Bachelor of Science majoring in mathematics, did honours also in that area. He's ended up as the head of Google in Ireland, but he also did other things along the way. You can see that there that he also had roles in consulting and with Fairfax, for example. And a third example is Karina Holden. So Karina has an impressive career in documentary filmmaking, which I think is a really interesting area. How did she get there? Well, looking again here, Karina studied the Bachelor of Science majoring in biology and in the history and philosophy of science. So I guess there's some connection here in what she studied and where she ended up. In particular, she has made documentary films about ecology. Her documentary Blue was about ocean conservation, and she started studying biology, for example. But there's not a really compelling connection there between what she studied and where she ended up. And I think that's a common theme here. However, if there is also the pathway that I've followed, the academic pathway, and this again is Professor Liz New. Liz is a chemist, as I mentioned. Her research focuses on developing chemical tools to assist the study of biological systems, which is a really important area. And she's won many prestigious prizes and grants. So science degrees prepare you to tackle problems, and they do that by instilling graduate qualities, these rather generic qualities for the graduates that are listed here: depth of expertise, creativity, collaboration and teamwork, excellent communication skills, problem solving, empathy and cultural competence. So they're quite generic things. But it turns out they match very well with the skills that employers want. This slide shows some of the opportunities in a science degree to gain disciplinary depth, that's depth in a particular area, as well as gaining breadth. That's from, for example, the open learning environment units, the OLEs. These are little units which allow you to sample other areas of study. to the 42 majors in science, which allow you to do a deep dive into a particular area, really gain deep understanding in a particular area. Teaching in the Faculty of Science is done across 8 schools, which are listed here, which encompass a broad range of disciplines from as listed. So they're listed from chemistry to vet science there. The degrees that you can study these areas in are designed to allow flexibility and choice for students. Here's a fairly complicated slide which shows you the different components of a degree. So within a degree, you have these structures: streams, programs, majors and minors. That's going from the largest structure, the stream, to the smallest. Here the streams, which are sort of a theme in what you study, they're in bold, and the programs and majors and minors are the other text. So what this shows is really the very broad range of options that are available to you within the science degree. It's really a multi-purpose degree. Teaching in science is done across 3 campuses and also across research institutes and field stations and hospitals. The yellow image on the right there is from the Nanoscience Hub. That's a clean room in the Nanoscience Hub where work is done, for example, in quantum physics, also in materials physics. And then at the bottom right there, for example, that's One Tree Island, which is a research station where marine research, for example, is done. So that's owned by the Uni of Sydney, and marine research is done there. If you study science at Sydney, then you'll join a community of scholars. So the university is really highly ranked internationally, as some of the stats here show. The university environment, I would say, is quite different from secondary school in distinctive ways. And one is the really close connection with world-class research. So the people who teach you are themselves researchers. I mentioned my research area, and you can ask them about their research and you can get involved in that research. I like this slide also because of the connection it conveys that students make to one another. That's really a crucial part of the university experience. You'll make friends along the way that you'll know for a really long time. This slide shows the Charles Perkins Centre, which is an interdisciplinary research centre doing both science and medical research. So centres like the CPC contribute to the world-class research that's done at the university. And again, here are some of the stats indicating the quality of the university's research. So that's basically it from me. I hope you will come to Sydney and study science. And I hope that I've given some sense of the fact that it's much more than the lab, although the lab is an important part of the learning experience, at least.
Well, team, Michael, thank you so much for that very informative session. And now to continue with the second part of our session today, we have 2 of our alumni. We will have from engineering, Dr. Jacob, and sorry, from science, Dr. Jacob. From engineering, we will have Cassie Brigden. So one of the things we have heard today was how if you study engineering, what are all the different ways that you can go with your career, all the different things you can do that you don't think you can do, and with science is the same. So Jacob Brigden, can you please give us a brief insight on your career and where has your studies taken you? Ladies first.
Okay, sure. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, all right.
Yeah, perfect. So I'm a structural engineer. I graduated with a degree in civil engineering and also with architecture from USyd a few years ago now. I've been working in a job where I do both structural engineering and event engineering. So my job in the last couple of years has involved things like climbing inside a crocodile enclosure that was empty at the new Sydney Zoo. I've inspected suspended Christmas decorations at 1 a.m. in the morning because somebody needs to sign off on those being structurally okay to hang above your heads. I've signed off on a giant inflatable head that was on stage at Coachella. And I've played a role in maybe 5 or 6 Sculpture by the Sea exhibitions in the past few years. So all those sculptures along Tamarama and also in Cottesloe in Perth. They have engineers look at them to make sure those are safe for public to interact with and they're not going to fall over in a storm. So it's a little bit of me.
Hi, everyone. Basically, maybe I will start with my education. So since I turned 6, I knew I'm going to do mathematics my whole life. That's the only thing I can do. So I did a bachelor degree in mathematics, pure mathematics, then 2 master's degree in mathematics. And that was all in Poland. And then I was looking for a place where I could do a PhD. And that's how I ended up in Sydney, at Sydney Uni doing financial mathematics. So that was a couple of years ago. But at the same time, I was always very passionate about using mathematics everywhere, across different disciplines. So I will cover some examples in a minute, but I think I'm a good example of a person who connects both science and engineering, and I will probably tell you a bit later about it. Now, career-wise, after PhD, I've spent a bit of time in banking, so credit risk, and then quite recently, I have moved to a company which is focused on renewable energy, and in this role, I'm helping them to analyze risks, but I also generate some insights based on my engineering knowledge and science knowledge. So that's about it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jacob and Cassie. So I suppose this is a question I will ask for all the 4 of you, Michael and Tim, in your position as academics, and you haven't taught to so many students, and Jacob and Cassie in your position as former students who have a lot of friends and all that. From your experience, how many of your friends or in general get the skills that they study and just follow the path? Sort of like what Jacob was saying. I did math, but I'm not working just in mathematics. Cassie, for example, she studied engineering, but she works in engineering. Tim and Michael, you've seen students develop, for a longer period of time, the same when you were in university. Is also the careers that you see that widespread, that you have so many of your friends or colleagues or former students that they really do different things with the degrees? Tim, you're mute.
Look, I might answer that. So I've got a group of friends that I did my degree with a few years ago. I started the same year as Mike, 88. So I'm a civil engineer. Only one of them would still call himself an engineer. He works up in Queensland, still in designing things of their mind. But most of them are still in what I will call the infrastructure and construction trade. One's a property developer. One works for the New South Wales government developing high schools. One is the president of the Concrete Institute of Australia. So even though they're not sitting at a desk doing calculations and stuff like an engineer might, a lot of them have stayed in that sort of infrastructure area. There's probably only one who's done something completely different, and he's actually now a school teacher. He was a vice principal of a high school. So from the friends that I know, we sort of tend to stay in that infrastructure field, but in a very, very broad sense.
Yeah, I think I'd have a similar answer to Tim when I think about the friends that I had from early university years who went through all of the years of uni, and I'm still friends with that set of people. And when I think about them, then they've they've ended up in different areas, but they're and not necessarily in a specifically science area, but they're using the science skills that they have. So, you know, I'm thinking about people who've gone into consulting, have gone into financial modeling, for example, and have gone into a variety of different areas in business.
In my case, many of my friends ended up in academia. Some of them ended up in engineering. Some of them ended up in financial institutions. But there are some of my friends ended up in different professions. Like, for instance, one friend is in legal field right now in Sydney. The other friend decided to focus on music, and he is a professional in that field. So, like, I think it relates to what was said earlier, that you can do a lot of things after mathematics. You can be even head of Google in Ireland. Thank you.
And I think I just can reiterate what everyone else said. So my example, really close, my two housemates are both graduates of the University of Sydney engineering degree, really close friends. I've gone on to live with them. One of them is a banker. He's been working with sustainable vehicle emission, like zero emissions targets. And the other one is working in sustainable agriculture. So she's working with beans, and she's doing financial models for a small company in Ethiopia that helps people with sustainable farming practices. So,
thank you very much, Cassie, Tim, Jacob, and Michael. So I think what is very clear here is that just because you study mechanical engineering, you study physics, you study mathematics, or any other degree, doesn't mean you just going to do that. Just because you do civil engineer doesn't mean that's the only thing you're going to do on mathematics, no? Now, having said that, again, for this lovely panel that are here today, what would you say are the skills and knowledge that you value more from your degree? What you learn the most that you think has taken you now? For example, you say, Tim, you don't work as a civil engineer, but you study civil engineer. Michael, you study physics, but you don't work as a physicist at the moment. And Jacob, you study mathematics, and you're not, I suppose you're not doing pure mathematics at the moment. So what skills did you learn on your degree that has really helped you or taken you that you still use to this day? Ladies first, Cassie?
sure. So I think obviously I've learned a lot of skills in my university that I use in my job every day in terms of engineering design, but it's also taught you how to think. It's taught you how to problem solve. So whether it's an engineering problem, whether it's just a general problem to do with like resourcing people or project management, you sort of have a systematic way of thinking about things, and it trains you up to be able to solve problems like on so many different levels. That's one thing. I might just stop there. I feel like this is probably directed at the other people since I'm very much doing my degree to a T.
I can go for next, I guess. I think you said, Carlos, that I'm not doing physics anymore. I mean, I do solar astrophysics. That's my research area. Although I'm an associate dean, so I'm spending a lot of time on that. The skills I value most, I would say the quantitative skills, the ability to use mathematics to solve a problem. I do that every day. I would say even in the role as associate dean, I like taking data and doing something with it and trying to work out what's right and wrong in the questions that are being asked. So I would value that the most highly.
I can probably go next. So I think that the core skill I got from mathematics is that I can approach logically many problems which I see. So I can cast reality, whatever it is, into mathematics. And there are many parts of mathematics I touched in the past, and I'm very kind of, it's a very useful skill, which can be used everywhere. And just to connect all the worlds here. So right now, I'm working in a company which focuses on large infrastructural projects. So the plan is to build the biggest solar farm in the world. So basically, we'll be I'm working a lot with solar irradiance. So I'm on the other side of the sun. So I think Michael studies what's happening on the sun. I'm looking closely what's happening here on our planet Earth. But at the same time, I'm also using mathematics in engineering space. So I'm working on thermal modeling of subsea cables, for instance. So the word which is coming right now is it will force you to learn absolutely everything. And this division between science and engineering is, I don't think, it's no longer there. So I think you have to think holistically about your skill set. And in my mind, mathematics is quite important. Thank you.
And can I answer a different question, which is, what skills didn't I learn at university, which are probably important? And I think the type of things that I do now, many years after finishing university, speaking to people like I am now, presenting, interacting with people, showing empathy. They're actually things I don't think I did pick up at university, and I picked up through other things along the way. But I did university 30 years ago, and it was really mathematical, and we've changed a lot now. I think there is a lot more emphasis on some of those other softer skills, those generic skills, which are probably more important about being a rounded professional and help you progress through the ranks.
Yeah, they're in the graduate qualities that I talked about. So cultural competence and empathy is indeed one of the graduate qualities.
Well, that's great. Thank you very much to the panel. There's a question here from an anonymous attendee. I think this will go more for Michael and Tim. Now, having said that, Jakub, you mentioned that a lot of your friends went to academia, which you didn't. So one of the questions that we have is, what is the pathway to become an academic? I don't think either Michael or you, Tim, when you study civil engineering or physics, said, oh, one day I would like to be a professor and teach at the university. Perhaps you did, but perhaps you didn't. What exactly is the pathway? When is that suddenly your mind changes and say, you know what, I will work at the university and I will teach? What would be your insights here?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, I knew that I wanted to learn more about physics and continue in that area, but I think the basic point that I had was I didn't know whether I was good enough to do it. And I think that at university I learned that I was, and as I continued in study, I realized that I could do this. And it's not, I mean, you don't have to, it's being a physicist, you don't have to be a genius. That's not true. You don't have to be super bright. You know, you have to be willing to apply yourself, and you have to learn this discipline, which is a difficult discipline, but a wonderful one, you know, one that I think gives a lot. So I don't know, somewhere along the line, I realized I could continue and succeed in this area. How do you do it practically? You do the undergraduate, you do honors, you do a PhD, and then you do postdoctoral study, and then you get a job at a uni or in other research areas. There are areas outside unis, there are institutes, for example, that do research. That would be my answer. Tim?
Well, when I was at university, I went to Grace Brothers, which was a department store, probably long gone. It's now called Myer. And when I finished uni, I stayed there. I worked there full time, doing stuff. And I was actually thinking of a career in retail management, not long after finishing my engineering degree. And it was just sort of a little bit of a fluke that I started working for a company that provided technical advice to engineers about the use of structural steel. And they had strong links with the University of Sydney. And it was sort of through them that one of the professors sort of grabbed me and said, well, you should come back and do a PhD. And, you know, the rest was history. Literally 1 week before I was finishing my PhD, and again, had no idea what I was going to do, one of the lecturers disappeared under a bit of a cloud. And we needed someone to lecture the class starting in a week's time. And again, I was tapped on the shoulder and said, hey, you're teaching this course. You know, that was about 25 years ago, and I sort of haven't looked back since.
Thank you very much, Michael and Tim. And Jacob, that we're in this topic, you mentioned most of your friends went to academia. You didn't because your past took you somewhere else, or never really was no one touched you on the shoulder and says, please come?
There are many aspects. I can tell you how things look in mathematics. So it is expected that people after mathematics, after graduating, let's say with a PhD at Sydney Uni, will go to States or will go to Europe for postdocs. And in my case, I didn't want to do that because I wanted to stay in Sydney. So usually, if someone thinks about academic career, they probably need to consider a lot of traveling and postdocs in other places before they secure a position somewhere. So that's my experience, and many friends who ended up in academia followed this pattern.
Thank you, Jacob. So I have a question here. I think this is for Cassie, but if someone else from the panel also wants to answer, please feel free to do so. So Cassie, did any of the subjects which you studied in year 11 and 12 relate to the degree which you studied? Were there any which you were enjoyable but didn't directly relate to your degree? Would you recommend them?
For sure. Like, I studied the highest unit of mathematics in year 12, which helped me roll into the engineering mathematics subjects in first year of university. They weren't essential by any means, but they just covered some additional content that starts to get covered in uni. So that was one thing that sort of rolled on through. And I also studied physics in year 12, which I found really interesting. I wanted to do it because I sort of was interested in science, was interested in maths. And when I was in year 12, I was trying to figure out what I should do with that interest, and sort of thought I might give engineering a go at the time. At the same time, I also studied visual arts in year 12 because I was interested in it, and that was really great. Wouldn't take that back. It obviously doesn't apply necessarily to my everyday work at the moment, but it's something that I really enjoy doing still. So yeah.
Thank you, Cassie. I suppose seeing that Jacob did a PhD and Cassie did a Bachelor of Engineering, I think this question might go for both Michael and Tim. So we have someone here, one of our audience, asking, how useful is it to study a combined engineering and science degree compared to just a single science or engineering degree in terms of future career opportunities and duration of degrees?
I was going to let Tim go first, but he's not coming on, so.
You go, Mike.
I mean, I would say it's the best of both worlds. You're choosing something that's somewhat more vocationally oriented. The engineering has got. I just muted myself, sorry. It combines that, you know, the vocation, specifically vocational area, although as Tim showed, engineers also end up in a range of areas. But it gives you that you can aim at that very specific vocation, or else within science, you can then explore a different area and gain some rather broader skills, I would suggest. Tim?
Look, so firstly, I think you make a decision about whether it is worthwhile to spend an extra year doing a combined degree, because it does take about an extra year to do it. I see it as an opportunity to have access to a wider range of interests, a wider range of possible specializations that you could do. So, for example, one of the things that I think is a great opportunity is actually in the area of health and genetics. And we get students who are doing, actually they're more doing a computing degree than an engineering degree, sort of focusing on data science, but also focusing on genetics, because being able to decipher DNA and the huge amounts of data that are involved in that, or similarly in medical imaging, we're talking about the ability to process and interpret digital files of an MRI of your brain, which are thousands of megabytes big, and being able to interpret what's the medical implication of that. I think our advances in technology do benefit from people having those two different fields.
Thank you very much, Michael and team. That's a question we do get most of the time, the difference between doing a combined degree and a single degree. Now, this is a question that I think might have come from an international audience. As you know, and our audience, just in case you're not aware, after you finish your bachelor's degree, you do honors, you could, depending on different circumstances, apply to a PhD. In other countries, you will need to do a master's degrees before transition to a PhD. No, Australia is a bit different, like many countries in that respect. So the question here we have from Lily is, can you complete a PhD after doing your bachelor's degree without doing your master's first? And would you recommend it for any of our doctors here?
I mean, the usual pathway at the moment is to do the 1-year honours following the bachelor's degree, and that qualifies you to start a PhD. That's the fastest route. Yeah, it's not usual at the University of Sydney to do to use a master's as the pathway to a PhD.
But Michael or Jacob, for example, you also in math. Would you say that, colleagues that you've seen, overseas colleagues, that has helped them to do, let's say, a bachelor of mathematics and then a master of mathematics and then do a PhD? Do they get better prepared following that pathway? Because we don't, but in other countries you do get a master of physics, a master of mathematics, and some people do follow that path.
In fact, I take my answer back slightly. We do have a Master of Mathematical Sciences, which is you do the bachelor degree and then a Master of Mathematical Sciences, and then you do a PhD in the area of mathematics only. So sorry, maybe but Jacob, do you want to add to that?
I would say in Europe, it's the pattern there to do bachelor degree and master degree. Honors, I don't think it's something which is quite common in Europe. So I think it's just country specific. Which is better? I would probably advise everyone to do honors and then do a PhD, because I think yeah, I don't think I think it's better to do PhD sooner rather than later.
Perfect, thank you very much. This I think might go, well, Cassie, no, but also for Tim and Michael, you might be aware of this. So we have a question here. Is there any advice for first year of university students on how to be prepared for it? I suppose, preparing for your first year after finishing, what advice would you give students, or would you say? As usual, ladies first. Cassie?
I think maybe just read up on the courses if you're interested, and look into what you're going to be studying, and you can start to look into it before you're even there. There's always the opportunity in the first few weeks of university to change courses around if you decide that you're not interested in something. It's never too late, but you know, if you've got the time and you're interested in starting to look into different subjects, you can do it before you go. There's obviously the whole other element of starting university where you have to get your living arrangements together. If you're moving, like I did, to a different city, you know, start looking into, you know, how you're going to commute to uni, all those types of things. Super important to do before you start if you want to understand how your day-to-day might look before you get to day one. Yeah, not sure what else to say.
So yes, Team Michael, any advice that you give for first-year students, you know, new students, things that they should look for or how to better prepare for that first-year transition from high school to university?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say a couple of things. One is to think carefully about your study habits and what works and doesn't work, and pay attention to that as you go along, and make sure that you engage with the subjects that you choose. Choose things that you're interested in. You're more likely to engage with them. That would be a piece of advice. And then if you get in trouble, look for help. I think at the university there's a wide range of help that's available to students, from the academic support to the more general support at the university from other students, for example. So take advantage of that. Really, don't get into trouble and not tell people about it. It doesn't work. As academics, we're all here. We're working to try to help students succeed.
I'd say one of the most significant changes from going to high school to university is the level of independence that you need to show in your studies. We don't take the role. If you don't want to turn up, you don't turn up. We're not necessarily even going to notice. So maintaining that drive and motivation, a lot of it comes down to you, which is back about my key bit of advice from the presentation about being excited and motivated for the destination you're having. If you want to be a scientist, if you want to be an engineer, if you know where you're going, that is going to help you maintain that motivation and show that level of independence that you will need to have to get through uni. And number two, have a good time.
Thank you very much. This question is for engineering. Suppose Tim and Cassie is, can you do engineering if you don't really like physics in high school and did not do physics in year 11 and 12?
Oh, I'll go first. So absolutely. So you do, unless it's changed in the last few years since I left, a first year subject of physics in your first year of civil engineering. No, not anymore. Tim's shaking his head.
We changed.
You changed. I did physics in my first year of the civil engineering degree when I did uni. There are lots of principles to do with civil engineering related to physics. It helps depending on where you go with it, like to do with like statics, equilibrium, like all that sort of foundation becomes relevant in things like structural engineering. But it's also such a wide world of physics. Like, to say that you're specifically interested in like one part of physics and not interested in some of the other parts, like you could go into so many different parts of engineering that are related or not related. It's just such a wide field. So not necessarily is probably the answer to the question. Yeah, sorry to Tim.
So look, just a couple of quick thoughts. There's actually going to be lots of things across your career that you might not like. You might not think that you're good enough, or or to be able to, and that you might need them. Yes, certainly, a knowledge of physics, understanding physics, liking physics, is important in some levels of performance, and in other levels, it's not so important. Depending on which part of engineering you're going to do, if you're going to be an electrical engineer, look, there's certainly, I think, a lot of circuit type stuff where the fundamentals comes from physics, where it is important. Just because you haven't done physics at high school, or you haven't done chemistry and you're going to be a chemical engineer, isn't necessarily an unsurmountable hurdle for any of the streams that you have to do. The key part is knowing that perhaps you're weak or not so strong in a particular field, and making sure that you put in the required effort to do those classes that do require physics or whatever. So actually knowing that you're weak in something, that's actually a good positive start, because it helps you decide where perhaps you've got to put in more priority down the track.
Thank you, Tim. And well, that concludes us evening today. It's already 8 p.m. We have to finish. So 3 things before we go. First one, we have open day on the 28th of August. It's going to be online from 10 to 2 p.m. So you are all welcome to come and talk to every single area of the faculty and the university. Second, this webinar has been recorded and will be sent to you as soon as it's available via email. So thank you. And third one, I would like for each of the members, I would like a big round of applause for each of the members of our panel. So thank you very much for being here today. And please, if each of you can say a few words to our future students. Cassie?
Oh, have fun, do something you enjoy, and reach out with any questions. Thanks, I don't know.
Jakub?
It's about persistence. Know how good you are at physics or mathematics. Thank you.
Michael?
Yeah, I hope you do choose to come and study at Sydney. I'll look forward to meeting you if you're in the Faculty of Science.
Tim?
You're not alone. We're actually all going through a lot of challenges at the moment, and you in particular, if you're going to be doing the HSC in a couple of weeks' time. If you can get through the challenges that COVID's thrown at you the last 18 months, you can do anything.
Thank you, Cassie, Jakub, Michael, and Tim, and from everyone else here at the University of Sydney, Faculty of Science and Engineering. Thank you very much for being here today. Good evening, stay safe, goodbye.